told me oil rigs were dangerous, but they never mentioned the knocking from inside the pipes, or what happens when the water beneath starts to glow. Welcome to Night Creepypasta Rules, where every story isn't just a warning, it's a ritual for survival. Tonight's tale takes you far offshore, to a rusted rig surrounded by darkness, pressure, and something ancient that listens through the steel. This isn't just another rules horror. Stay till the end, because the final twist changes everything. And if you've ever felt something watching from the waves, leave a comment. Subscribe for weekly descent into the strangest rules from the edge of reality. The ocean's waiting. Don't look down. The metallic groan that shivered up through the soles of my boots wasn't the rig settling into the waves. It felt deeper, older, like something immense turning over in its sleep in the crushing black miles below us. That was my welcome to Rig 47, perched like a precarious metal insect over the ink-dark waters of the Gulf. Even from the helicopter approaching through the humid twilight, it looked wrong. Too large, too stark against the bleeding horizon. A lattice of steel and burning lights defiant against the encroaching emptiness. The wind hitting me as I stepped onto the helideck wasn't clean sea air. It was thick, tasting of salt, hot metal, and the pervasive greasy tang of crude oil. It whipped my cheap jacket around me, a flimsy shield against the vastness. Below, the waves churned, unseen in the gloom, but for the agitated foam, briefly illuminated by the platform's floodlights. The noise was immediate, a physical presence. The roar of the departing chopper fading into the constant, deep-throated hum of the rig itself. A mechanical leviathan breathing around me. A man detached himself from the shadows near the stairwell, his figure etched by the harsh work lights. Older face like worn leather mapped with grime, and faint scars, eyes startlingly pale in the gloom. He didn't offer a hand, just a curt nod. Reyes, you're with me. Name's Sully. His voice was gravel, roughened by years of shouting over machinery, or maybe something else entirely. As I followed him towards the clanging descent into the rig's belly, I caught a glimpse of another figure hurrying past. Younger, face pale and drawn, eyes darting nervously. He vanished down a corridor before I could register more than a fleeting sense of shared anxiety. Then, maybe, the other new hire mentioned in the email. Sully didn't waste time on pleasantries. The tour was a blur of graded walkways, humming generators, and the dizzying sight of the ocean far below through gaps in the floor plates. Every surface felt slightly slick, vibrating with the rig's ceaseless energy. He pointed out the key stations, the emergency shutoffs, the mess hall that smelled perpetually of stale coffee and fried food. My stomach churned, partly from the helicopter ride, partly from the dawning reality of this place. The debts back home, the eviction notice pinned to my apartment door. They seemed abstract now, flimsy reasons to be standing here, suspended between the indifferent sky and whatever waited in the deep. This hazard pay better be worth it. In a small vibrating office crammed with monitors displaying pressure readings and sonar maps I didn't understand, Sully stopped. He didn't gesture towards the blinking screens. Instead, he pulled a greasy, laminated card from his pocket and slapped it onto the metal desk. 3 lines were printed in stark block capitals. All right, Reyes. Forget half the safety manual bullshit they fed you on shore. You want to last the rotation, you follow these. No questions, no arguments. You just do them. I leaned closer, the hum of the machine seeming to intensify, filling the small space. If the water glows beneath the platform, don't look down. If you hear knocking from inside the pipes, don't answer it. If a crew member walks in soaking wet without explanation, avoid eye contact. I read them again. My throat felt dry. Strange operational quirks, hallucinations caused by gas leaks, elaborate hazing for the new guy. I searched Sully's face for a flicker of humor, a sign this was some twisted joke. There was none, only a profound weariness in his pale eyes, a chilling seriousness that made the hairs on my arms prickle. "Don't look down," I managed, the words feeling stupid as soon as they left my mouth. "Means what it says," Sully grunted, snatching the card back. "See it glow? You find something else to look at. Floor, ceiling, your own damn feet. Got it?" He didn't wait for an answer, just turned and led the way back out into the labyrinthine corridors. "Your shift starts now. Stick to the upper decks tonight mostly. Check the gauges on levels 3 and 4. Radio in every hour." The first few hours passed in a monotonous haze of routine, checking pressure valves that gleamed dully under fluorescent lights, logging readings onto a flickering tablet, the colossal structure groaning and sighing around me like a beast in uneasy slumber. Outside the pools of light, the darkness was absolute, pressing in against the windows, occasionally disturbed by the distant flicker of lightning. From a storm far out at sea, the air down here felt heavier, the smell of decay stronger, less like mere algae, more like something anciently organic disturbed from the seabed. Loneliness was a tangible thing, broken only by the crackle of the radio for my hourly check-ins with Sully's disembodied voice. It was nearing the end of my shift, the darkest hour before the first hint of dawn. I was on level 3, a quieter section, mostly pipes and junction boxes. The main generator's thrum was a distant pulse here. Silence, thick and waiting. Then I heard it. Faint at first, easily mistaken for the rig's normal settling noises, but it repeated. A soft, rhythmic thump. Thump. It wasn't random clanking. It was measured, deliberate. And it was coming from inside the large insulated pipe running along the bulkhead right beside my head, like knuckles rapping softly against the thick metal. From the inside out. The rapping inside the pipe wasn't random. It settled into a disturbing rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. Over and over. A child's knocking game played by something old and cold. I forced myself to turn away, focusing on the gauge readings, my hands slick with sweat on the tablet screen. "Don't answer it." Sully's voice echoed in my mind, flat and absolute. But ignoring it was like trying to ignore a drill boring into your skull. The sound seemed to follow me as I moved down the corridor, resonating through the very structure of the rig. Was it traveling? Or was it starting up in other pipes too? There, in the relative brightness of a junction hub, I nearly collided with Ben. He looked worse than when I'd glimpsed him earlier, his face clammy, eyes wide with a frantic energy. "You hear that, right?" he whispered, his voice tight, gesturing vaguely at the network of pipes overhead. "The tapping. It's everywhere now." "Rig settling," I lied, the word tasting like ash, old platform. Lots of strange noises. He wasn't buying it. No one. "This is different. Earlier. On level 5, it sounded like someone calling my name. Softly." He shuddered, a tremor running through his thin frame. "Just ignore it," I said, more sharply than intended, pushing past him. His fear was contagious, a spark threatening to ignite the tinderbox of my own unease. My shift pattern gave me a few daytime hours for rest, but sleep offered little escape. The rhythmic tapping echoed in my dreams, morphing into the frantic pounding of someone trapped, drowning. I woke drenched in sweat, the rig's constant hum feeling like a predator's purr, driven by a desperate need for answers. I sought out Sully during his pre-shift check. He was welding a support beam, sparks showering the grated floor. "Sully, about those noises," I began, trying to sound casual. He didn't even look up, the flare of the welder momentarily blinding me. "Pipe acoustics. Water pressure. Happens. It sounds like knocking," I pressed. "Specific patterns." "Ben Said," he heard. Sully shut off the welder with a hiss, plunging us into relative quiet, save for the rig's deep thrum. He finally turned, his pale eyes hard. "Ben's jumpy, and you're new. You hear things in a place like this. Imagination runs wild when you're stuck out here. Focus on your job, Reyes. Checking gauges. Maintaining equipment. That's what keeps you safe. Curiosity. He shook his head slowly. Curiosity gets people hurt. Or worse. His tone left no room for argument. Frustrated, I tried accessing the rig's maintenance logs on a communal terminal later, searching for reports of strange noises, structural issues, anything. Us sections were classified, password protected beyond my basic clearance. The few accessible reports mentioned acoustic anomalies and pressure fluctuations, dismissed as standard operational hazards. It felt like hitting a steel wall. That evening, as I started my night rotation, a bank of lights flickered violently overhead on level 4, then died, plunging a long section of corridor into near total darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in, dim, blood-red bulbs that cast long, dancing shadows and made the pipes seem to writhe. My heart hammered against my ribs. A simple electrical fault, or something else testing the boundaries. As I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam slicing through the oppressive red gloom. I heard it again, closer this time. Tap, tap, pop, pause, tap, tap, right beside me. From inside the cold, dark metal, I practically ran through the rest of my checks on that level. My senses felt heightened, raw. Every creak of the structure, every sigh of the wind through the metal lattice, sounded like a whisper, a footstep. Paranoia wrapped around me like a shroud. Later, needing air, I found myself on one off-wrists, the wind biting but clean, washing away the corridor's stale confinement. Below, the sea was a vast black mirror, reflecting only the indifferent stars. I kept my gaze fixed on the horizon, remembering the first rule. But out of the corner of my eye, far down, in the deep, dark water beyond the direct spill of the rig's lights, I saw it, a faint, shifting luminescence, a cold, unnatural green glow, pulsing gently in the abyss. The glow became a fixture of the nights that followed, sometimes faint, a mere suggestion in the peripheral darkness, other times disconcertingly bright, casting sickly green reflections on the underside of the lower decks. It pulsed with a slow, hypnotic rhythm, like a heartbeat in the deep. And it called, not with a sound, but with a silent, insistent pull in the back of my mind. Look, just a glance, see what lies beneath. Rule 1, don't look down. It became a mantra, a desperate prayer whispered under my breath whenever I had to patrol near the rig's edge. One night, the pull was stronger than ever. The air felt thick, charged. The light below wasn't just glowing. It seemed to writhe, patterns swirling within its depths. I found Ben standing dangerously close to the railing on the lowest accessible deck, his back to me, utterly still. His posture was rigid, mesmerized. The green light painted the underside of his chin, gave his skin a corpse-like pallor. "Ben!" I yelled, my voice hoarse against the wind and machinery. He didn't react. I grabbed his arm, yanking him back just as he seemed to sway forward. His eyes were unfocused, pupils dilated. "Don't look, man. Remember the rule." He stumbled back, gasping, shaking his head as if waking from a trance. I don't know," he stammered, looking wildly around anywhere but down. It was beautiful, like it wanted to show me something. The incident left me shaken, the hypnotic power of the light far more potent than I'd imagined. Other strangeness seeped into the rig's routines. Static crackled over the normally clear radio channels, sometimes resolving into fleeting whispers that sounded almost like words, before dissolving back into noise. Tools left securely on a workbench would be found slightly askew, as if examined by unseen hands. Shadows in my peripheral vision seemed deeper, lingered longer than they should, and the knocking continued, evolving. It sometimes mimicked the specific cadence of Sully's heavy tread on the walkway above, or the frantic drumming of Ben's fingers on the mess hall table. A cruel, intelligent mimicry designed to fray the nerves. My suspicion of Sully grew. I found him once near a cluster of pipes, known for the persistent knocking, not repairing them, but carefully painting intricate, symbol-like marks onto the joints with thick, tar-like paint. He claimed it was an experimental sealant. His explanation curt, his eyes avoiding mine. It looked more like a ward than maintenance. When I tried to press him about the escalating strangeness, about Ben's near miss, he shut me down hard. You keep your head down, Reyes. Do the job. Don't make waves. The feeling of external interference intensified. Our scheduled supply boat, bringing fresh food, mail, and vital replacement parts, was delayed. Thorne's voice over the radio offered only clipped, bureaucratic excuses. Weather, engine trouble, logistical snags. But the weather in the Gulf had been clear for days when a minor pump malfunction occurred. Thorne's instructions from onshore seemed oddly counterintuitive, directing the repair team via a route that took them unnecessarily close to a section where the knocking was loudest and the eerie green glow most visible from the lower grates. It felt less like guidance, more like deliberate exposure. The tension stretched tighter each passing hour. The rig felt less like a workplace, more like a cage suspended over something ancient and hungry. One evening, as Sully and I were monitoring a pressure transfer, a new alarm suddenly split the air. Not the subtle warnings, not the whispers or knocks. This was a full-throated, shrieking siren, accompanied by flashing red emergency lights, a klaxon reserved for genuine immediate danger. A readout flashed on the main console. Gas leak detected. Level 7. The deepest accessible level. A place we were usually forbidden to go without explicit orders. A place directly above the hungry, glowing dark. Level 7 was hellish. Herani, Pandian Waheshetoran, Palmuni, Anisiarish. Emergency lights cast everything in a pulsing crimson glow. The air thick with the acrid tang of the leaking gas. Thankfully contained to a specific quadrant, according to the screaming sensors. But the smell permeated everything. The main klaxon had been silenced locally, replaced by the urgent, repetitive beep 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 of gas detectors and the hiss of deployed fire suppression foam near the leak source. Sully, Ben, and I, along with two other roughnecks from the day shift, caught in the overlap, moved cautiously through the narrow pipe-choked corridors, our respirators clamped tight, muffling our already ragged breathing. Our task was simple: reach the secondary shutoff valve, deep in the section. But navigating level 7 felt like descending into the rig's diseased bowels. Pipes wept condensation that smelled foul. Unlike clean seawater, metal surfaces were slick with a thin, oily film. The ever-present hum of the rig was different here, deeper, resonant, vibrating through the floor plates like a monstrous heartbeat. The knocking sounds were pervasive, coming from all directions now, muffled by the respirator but undeniable. We were rounding a tight corner, our flashlight beams cutting jumpy arcs through the red haze. Ben was jumpy, stumbling slightly. Sully was grimly focused. And then I saw him, standing perfectly still in a side alcove, almost obscured by steam escaping a nearby vent. A figure in standard rig coveralls, soaking wet, not just damp, drenched as if he just climbed out of the ocean. Dark water dripped from his hair, his clothes pooling silently at his feet. The water wasn't clean. It looked thick, almost black, reflecting the red emergency lights sickeningly. His head was bowed, face hidden in shadow, hands hanging limply at his sides. The air around him felt unnaturally cold, heavy with the stench of stagnant brine and something else. Something like rotten, deep-seed mud. Rule of 3 slammed into my mind with physical force. Avoid eye contact. My gaze snapped away instantly, fixing on the grimy bulkhead opposite. My heart tried to hammer its way out of my chest. Beside me, I heard Ben gasp, a choked, terrified sound muffled by his mask. Sully muttered a curse, low and harsh, grabbing Ben's arm and physically pulling him forward. "Move! Keep moving! Eyes front!" he hissed, his voice tight with something that sounded like genuine fear. We hurried past the alcove, none of us daring a backward glance. The image was seared into my brain. The unnatural stillness, the impossible wetness, the profound sense of wrongness. Who was it? Why were they down here? How could they be soaked like that? The questions hammered at me, but the primal fear evoked by Sully's reaction and the memory of the rule overrode everything. Whatever that was, it wasn't just a crewmate caught in a leak. The rest of the emergency felt dreamlike. We reached the valve, sealed the leak. The alarms eventually fell silent, leaving only the deep hum and the unsettling memory. Back on the relative safety of the upper decks, the shared experience hung heavy in the air. Ben was practically catatonic, staring blankly. Even the veteran roughnecks looked shaken, avoiding each other's eyes. The unspoken truth settled over us. The rig wasn't just haunted by strange noises and lights. Something tangible, something other, was physically present among us. Later, seeking a moment alone before my shift officially began, I found a small, overlooked storage closet. Tucked behind corroded spare parts, etched crudely into the metal wall, was a message, almost obscured by rust and grime. It looked old. It seized through the eyes. "Don't let it see you. The pipes are its veins. The water is its blood. The company knows." My blood ran cold. The company knows. Thorne's evasiveness, the delayed supplies, the strange orders. It wasn't incompetence. It was complicity. As I stood there, the etched words burning themselves onto my retinas, my radio crackled. It was Sully, his voice rougher than usual. "Reyes, meet me on the main deck, now. There's something you need to know before tonight gets any darker." I found Sully on the main deck, near the railing where the wind snatched savagely at his worn jacket. He wasn't looking out at the churning Black Sea, but inland, towards a home I suddenly realized he might never see again. The storm he'd hinted at wasn't just on the horizon. It felt like it was brewing directly beneath us. The rig itself seemed to hum with a frantic, discordant energy. The vibrations in the deck plates frantic, arrhythmic. "It's starting, Reyes," Sully said, his voice barely audible over the rising wind and the rig's internal groaning. "Whatever this thing down there is, it follows a cycle, tied to astronomical alignments, pressure shifts, God knows what." The old-timers whispered about it. Sacrifices. Appeasement. He finally looked at me, his pale eyes reflecting the distant, flickering lightning. The company didn't just stumble on this pocket of oil. They knew this was here too. The rules, they weren't meant to keep us safe forever. Just manageable until feeding time. Feeding time. The words hung in the air, colder than the spray whipping across the deck. Before I could process the monstrous implication, the rig gave a violent shudder, a deep, structural boom that wasn't thunder. Far below, the sickly green glow erupted, surging upwards, no longer just a distant luminescence, but a roiling cauldron of light that seemed to illuminate the very bones of the rig from beneath. Simultaneously, the knocking exploded, not from one pipe or even a dozen, but from everywhere. A deafening, insane polyrhythm hammered through the metal structure, vibrating in my teeth, my skull, the deep chorus demanding entry. Then the storm hit proper. Rain lashed down horizontal in the gale force winds, stinging like needles. Waves, impossibly large, crashed against the support pillars, sending plumes of white water exploding high onto the lower decks, and the lights went out, not flickering this time. A sudden, total plunge into blackness, broken only by the terrifying green glare from below and the strobing flashes of lightning. The emergency lights sputtered once, twice, then died with a pathetic fizzle. Panic erupted. Shouted warnings became terrified screams snatched away by the wind. Through the chaos, I saw Ben stumble out onto the deck, his face a mask of terror, momentarily lit by a lightning flash. "Sully! Alex! What's happening? Get inside!" Sully roared back, grabbing my arm, pulling me towards a relative shelter of the accommodation block's entrance. But inside wasn't safe. A horrific screech of tearing metal echoed from within, followed by the sound of water, torrents of it, rushing through the corridors. Pipes were bursting. We scrambled into the nearest doorway just as a section of the grated walkway behind us buckled with a deafening groan and collapsed into the raging, glowing sea below. The structure was failing. Through the roar of the storm and the internal cacophony, a new sound emerged. Wet, dragging footsteps, splashing sounds that didn't belong inside a flooding corridor. They came from the darkness, figures silhouetted against the emergency exit signs that still flickered intermittently at the end of the hall. Wet figures. Not one or two, but maybe half a dozen, lurching forward with an unnatural, synchronized gait. Water streamed from them, black and viscous in the dim light, and the air grew thick with the stench of the abyssal deep. They weren't just present anymore. They were hunting. Guttural clicks echoed from their unseen faces. "This way!" Sully yelled, shoving me down a side passage I barely recognized. We ran, Ben stumbling behind us, his breath coming in panicked sobs. It was a nightmare maze. Corridors slick with oil and seawater, debris blocking passages, the relentless thump, thump, thump of the chorus seeming to guide our pursuers. We burst into the main control room. Miraculously, some panels still flickered with residual power. Monitors showed static, alarming pressure drops, hull integrity warnings flashing red. "Comms!" Sully barked, hitting buttons on a console. Static hissed, then cleared momentarily. A voice cut through, impossibly calm, chillingly familiar. "Thorn, repeat. Rig 47 personnel. Acknowledge final harvest protocol," the detached voice said, devoid of static now, as if broadcast from the room next door. "Subsurface entity designated Bloom has reached optimal energy signature following stimulus cycle. Surface structure integrity is now secondary. Initiate controlled platform purge sequence on my mark. Geothermal tap will ensure full sterilization. Commendations on your service. Thorn out. Sterilization. Harvest. Stimulus cycle." We were the stimulus. The purge wasn't rescue. It was erasure. Sully slammed his fist onto the console, a strangled cry of rage and despair tearing from his throat. "That bastard, he knew. He always knew." He looked at me, his face ravaged by guilt. "My daughter. They have her picture on file, Reyes. Threatened her schooling, her future. If I didn't play along, keep the new blood calm, make sure the rules were mostly followed. Until now." Red lights began flashing on a schematic of the rig. Purge sequence initiated. Countdown timers appeared on multiple screens. 15 minutes. They're venting the main gas lines. Sully breathed, horror dawning in his eyes. Then the geothermal tap ignites it all. An accident. The control room door buckled inwards with a screech of metal. Wet hands, slick and grayish, clawed through the opening. Ben screamed, scrambling backwards, tripping over a loose cable. Two figures flowed into the room, their movements fluid, wrong. Their faces were obscured by shadow and dripping water, but the low, clicking sounds intensified. "Go!" Sully roared, shoving me towards a maintenance hatch on the far side of the room. He grabbed a heavy fire axe from the emergency locker. "Get to the emergency lifeboat station. Deck C. It's shielded. Might survive the initial blast. Go!" He turned to face the encroaching figures, hefting the axe. "It marked me long ago, Reyes," he yelled over the rising clicks and the external storm. Should have ended here years ago. Tell them. Tell someone what they did. He charged, swinging the axe into the nearest figure with a sickening wet thud. I didn't wait. Scrabbling through the hatch, then right behind me, I plunged into a narrow, dark maintenance shaft. Behind us, I heard Sully's enraged roar, cut off abruptly by a horrifying, watery gurgle and the shattering clang of the axe falling to the floor. The shaft descended steeply. We half slid, half fell, the sounds of the control room fading above, replaced by the groaning protest of the rig tearing itself apart, and the ever-present, maddening knocking. We emerged onto Deck C, a lower, external platform, precariously close to the surging, glowing water. Rain and spray lashed us. The lifeboat station was just ahead, a reinforced steel container. But something stood between us and it. It wasn't like the others. Taller, less distinct, seeming to coalesce from the storm itself and the impossible light rising from the depths. It shimmered, dripping black water that hissed as it hit the hot metal deck. Tendrils of sickly green energy pulsed within its vague form. The air around it vibrated intensely, the chorus reaching a fever pitch, focusing into this single, terrifying point. It didn't have a face, but I felt its attention lock onto me. Cold, ancient, and utterly alien. Ben froze beside me, whimpering. Running was impossible. Hiding futile. The rules spun in my head. Don't look down. Don't answer. Avoid eye contact. Passive defenses against an overwhelming force. Sully's sacrifice. Thorn's betrayal. The etched warning. It sees through the eyes. It wasn't just about letting it see. Maybe it was about how you looked. Maybe you had to meet its gaze. Not with fear, but with defiance. A mad gamble. The entity drifted closer, the knocking sound now seeming to emanate from within my own bones. The purge countdown echoed faintly from a nearby speaker. 5 minutes. I braced myself, took a deep breath, tasting ozone, salt, and decay. Then, deliberately, breaking the final rule, I lifted my head and stared directly into the heart of the shifting, faceless nightmare. I focused all my fear, my rage, my grief for Sully, my hatred for Thorn, into that single act of defiance. I looked. For a fraction of a second, there was nothing but an overwhelming psychic pressure, a sense of infinite, cold depths. Then the entity recoiled as if struck. A silent scream tore through my mind, not mine, but its. The green light flared blindingly. The knocking stopped abruptly, replaced by a high-pitched, tearing shriek that wasn't sound but pure mental agony. Then the world exploded. The deck beneath my feet erupted upwards. Heat and force slammed into me, throwing me backwards, weightless into the chaos of the storm and the debris. My last conscious thought was of the blinding green light, the silent scream, and the horrifying realization that looking hadn't killed it. It had only made it angrier. Pain brought me back first, a searing fire in my shoulder, a dull throb behind my eyes that matched the rhythmic groan of tortured metal somewhere nearby. Then the cold, a deep, penetrating chill from the salt spray and the rain-soaked remnants of my clothes. I coughed, the air tasting of smoke, brine, and something metallic, like blood. My ears rang with the phantom echo of the explosion. I blinked, vision swimming. Twisted steel girders clawed at a sky slowly softening from black to bruised purple. Dawn was breaking. The storm's fury had passed, leaving behind a ravaged seascape and the mangled corpse of Rig 47. What was left of the deck I was on tilted at a drunken angle, slick with rain and something oily. Fire still smoldered in pockets of wreckage, casting flickering, hellish light against the growing dawn. The main structure above was a blackened skeleton, partly collapsed into the churning gray water. Of the control room, there was only a gaping hole and twisted debris. I scanned the wreckage frantically, calling his name until my voice was raw, but only the mournful cry of a distant seabird and the groan of dying metal answered. Alone. The words settled into my bones, heavier than the cold. My left arm hung uselessly, pain flaring white-hot when I tried to move it. Dislocated shoulder, maybe broken. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton wool and broken glass. I dragged myself towards a relatively intact section of bulkhead, finding meager shelter from the persistent wind and spray. The vastness of the gulf surrounded me, in different waves chewing at the wreckage. Thorn's voice echoed in my memory. Final harvest protocol, stimulus cycle, sterilization. The cold wasn't just the sea air. It was the chilling realization of how utterly disposable we had been. Cogs in a machine designed to feed something ancient and obscene lurking in the depths. Sully's last desperate charge wasn't just bravery. It was penance. Near the wreckage of the control room walkway, I spotted something half buried under debris. A cracked tablet, its screen miraculously alive, displaying fragmented error messages and a single corrupted data file header. Project Bloom, Psycholog, fragment. Confirmation I didn't need but dreaded finding. The company knows. As the gray light strengthened, painting the waves in shades of pewter and lead, a morbid curiosity drew my gaze downwards. The intense, boiling green light was gone. The intense, boiling green light was gone. The water was just water. Choppy, gray, hostile. Yet, deep down, was that a faint, residual flicker? A trick of the light, the trauma? Or was it still there, sleeping now satiate? A single, soft tap sounded from a bent piece of rebar near my foot, startlingly distinct in the relative quiet. A final echo, or a reminder? Survival instinct, raw and primal, finally kicked in. I had to find the lifeboat station, or the beacon. Stumbling, dragging my useless arm, I searched the tilting, treacherous deck. The main station was obliterated, but further along, miraculously wedged between two collapsed storage containers, was the battered, dented box of the emergency position, indicating radio beacon. Hope, fragile but fierce, flared in my chest. Its casing was cracked, the activation switch stiff, but the indicator light flickered weakly when I finally jammed it into the on position with my good hand. Was the signal getting out? There was no way to know. Exhausted, shivering, I sank down beside it, scanning the empty horizon, praying for a ship, a plane, anything. And then I saw it, miles out, maybe impossibly far for the detail I perceived, yet undeniably there, a lone figure standing on the water. Still, silent, impossibly upright on the restless surface of the ocean, drenched, dark, featureless at this distance, yet radiating the same unnatural presence as the figure in the corridor. It wasn't approaching. It was just watching, waiting. Fear turned my blood to ice water. The figure on the waves didn't move. A silent sentinel against the vast gray canvas of sea and sky. It felt like a final mockery. Survival within sight, yet still under the inescapable gaze of the abyss. Was it the entity itself? A manifestation? Or just my traumatized mind finally shattering? It didn't matter. The beacon was on. That had to be enough. Hours crawled by. The sun climbed, burning through the clouds, reflecting mercilessly off the water, searing my skin. Thirst became a physical agony, my throat raw, my lips cracking. I huddled by the beacon, scanning the horizon until my eyes burned, flinching at every shadow on the waves, imagining movement where there was none. The figure, real or imagined, remained, a constant, distant anchor for my terror. Late afternoon, a glint of metal. A ship. No, smaller, drifting towards me on the current. A section of walkway plating, miraculously buoyant, large enough to support, leaving the beacon transmitting its desperate pulse. I slid into the cold water, the shock stealing my breath, and kicked weakly towards the makeshift raft, dragging my injured arm. Hauling myself aboard was agony, but the plating felt solid beneath me, a pathetic island in the infinite ocean. Days bled together. Sun, salt, thirst, hunger. The sky was a pitiless blue, the ocean a restless, endless expanse. My skin blistered, my mind frayed. Flashbacks ambushed me. The glowing water, the knocking pipes, the wet figures, Sully's final scream, the explosion. Sometimes I hallucinated ships on the horizon, heard phantom voices calling my name. The figure on the water was gone, but the feeling of being watched persisted, a constant pressure behind my eyes. On the third day, or maybe the fourth, time had lost meaning. I saw it. Not a hallucination this time. A dark line on the horizon, land. Or maybe a larger ship, stable and real. Hope, sharp and painful, surged through me. I tried to paddle with my good arm, kicking weakly, tears of desperation tracing paths through the salt crust on my face. Closer. Definitely land. Trees. A smudge of green against the blue. Salvation. I sobbed with relief, paddling with renewed frantic energy. Then I felt it. A faint vibration through the metal plate beneath my hand. I paused, listening. Silence. Only the slap of water against the plating. I dismissed it. Delirium. But it came again. A soft, rhythmic thump. 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 Cump. Cump. Coming from inside the metal right beneath my palm. My blood ran cold. No! No! Trembling, I lowered my head, peering at the metal. Nothing. Just rust and salt water. But the knocking continued. Insistent. Intimate. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. The same rhythm from the pipes on the rig, with dawning horror. I looked down at the water immediately surrounding my raft. It was beginning to glow. A faint, sickly green luminescence, swirling, coalescing in the water around the metal plate. The light intensified, pulsing gently. The knocking from the raft grew stronger, vibrating up my arm. A whisper seemed to rise from the waves themselves. A sibilant, multi-layered sound that curled into my ears like smoke. It sounded almost like my name, stretched and distorted, spoken by 1,000 cold, wet throats. Alex. I looked from the glowing water to the impossibly distant shore, then back to the knocking, vibrating metal beneath my hand. There was no escape. The rig was gone, but the ocean remained. And the chorus, the bloom, whatever it was, it hadn't needed the rig. It was the ocean. Or the ocean was its blood, its veins, its infinite patient body. I wasn't adrift on the sea. I was adrift in it. A fly trapped in amber, saved only for a later meal. The green light pulsed brighter, reflecting in my wide, terrified eyes. The knocking filled my head. The whispering voices called my name from the deep. The rig is gone, the company's secrets, scorched away in fire and lies. But Reyes, he's still out there, drifting on metal that remembers the pipes, the knocks, and the thing beneath. Because some rules don't protect you, they bind you. And if you made it to the end of this story, you heard the knock too, drop a comment below. What would you have done? Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules. New horrors every week. Some from the woods, some from the cities, and some, like this one, from the deep. The next rule might be the only thing standing between you and what's waiting in the dark.